So, good evening. Due to travel, I need to pre-record this talk again today, but wanted to share the fourth in this, the fourth topic in this sequence on developing a good heart that we've been looking at over the last few weeks. This topic is tonight is on the mind of great compassion. Great compassion. So, this sequence of teachings we've been doing, meditations, is on developing a heart. And these five minds I've been emphasizing again and again. The first three are minds of love, called affectionate love, cherishing love, wishing love. And the fourth mind we'll be looking at tonight, called a great compassion. And the fifth mind next week we'll look at we're referring to as the supreme good heart, but it's known technically as bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is the mind of awakening. So the mind of great compassion is the focus for this class. What is great compassion? We need to begin by understanding what is compassion. Compassion is a mind wishing for others to be free from suffering. It's a mind that cares about others, sees them to be suffering or at risk of suffering, and wishes them to be free from that suffering. What is great compassion? Great compassion is a mind wishing for all living beings, without exception, to be free from all of their sufferings, without exception. Great compassion is a mind wishing for all living beings, without exception, to be free from all of their sufferings, without exception. Everyone has compassion automatically. We have compassion for our friends if they're hurting, if they're in pain, if we see a desperate state, we have compassion for them. For an animal, we certainly have compassion for ourselves. If we are experiencing suffering, we want ourselves to be free from suffering. But we do not have great compassion unless we have specifically trained in this mind. Great compassion never arises naturally. Our normal compassion is a biased compassion. It is compassionate towards some, not compassionate towards others. If our friend is in pain, we want their suffering to stop. If someone we don't like is in pain, we may be not very bothered. Maybe we even pleased that they're in pain. We think, they deserved it. They were not nice to me. Therefore, they deserve suffering. You cannot have great compassion without equanimity. So equanimity is this balanced mind that has an equal concern for everyone. And so these or not necessarily seeing everyone in the same way or treating everybody in the same way, but concern, recognizing that everyone's feelings are important, everyone's happiness is important, their freedom is important, every person's important. People, of course, the word person includes animals. That's why to develop this mind of great compassion, we have to train first in these preliminary aspects of the good heart. Affectionate love is the first one. A warm heart, a feeling of closeness. Affectionate love emphasizes feeling. Cherishing love, a mind that regards others as important, precious, and their happiness and freedom from suffering as important. And it is specifically this ground of cherishing love that is the basis for us to develop compassion. If we have cherishing love, we see someone suffering, we will feel compassion for them. And wishing love is really just the flip side of great compassion. Wishing love and great compassion are one mind in effect. Wishing love wishes others to be happy. Great compassion wishes for them to be free from suffering. So we need to train in these minds. Overcoming bias, building this good heart, building a warmth, affection, a feeling of closeness towards everyone without exception, a concern for them. And then we need to become aware of their suffering. Buddha said, I teach only suffering and the alleviation of suffering. Two things. Buddhism, sometimes called the religion of lists, because there's a lot of lists. There's one main list you need to know. It consists of two items, two topics that he taught: suffering and the alleviation of suffering. Now, No one needs to teach us suffering. Everyone knows pain. Um, because we all know pain, that's the root of our compassion. It's because we know what it's like to be in pain that we can feel compassion for others who have suffering. No one needs to be taught compassion or taught suffering. So what does he mean when he says, I teach only suffering, the alleviation of suffering? He means there are some kinds of suffering that are more subtle that you may not notice or identify as suffering. So imagine you're sitting in the sun. It's a nice warm day, and you're starting to feel quite warm, right, on your skin. Um, if you have the experience of being sunburned, you will recognize in advance, I'm going to get burned. If you don't have that experience of getting sunburned, or you've forgotten and so forth, you may just notice this quite warm feeling, but not realize that what that is the cause of great suffering later. So that's an example of how it sometimes takes us some wisdom to realize we've created the causes for suffering, or that suffering is implicit in something. If you eat food which may taste delicious, but is actually harmful for you, at the extreme, something that's poisonous, or at a less extreme, something that if you just eat a lot of it over and over again, there's plenty of food like this in our world, you will get diabetes, you will become obese, whatever. So a food that will cause you suffering long term, you can come to see that food as a cause of suffering instead of a cause of pleasure. You can train your mind to recognize that food is not going to bring you happiness long term. Again, that's a kind of suffering that we need to be taught, recognizing that certain foods, if it may be poisonous or long term, will cause us problems. The suffering that we really need to come to understand is the suffering that arises due to our not understanding the way things are. And especially our not understanding how things change constantly, just continuously. So we want things. We are constantly wanting things. We want things. Why? Because we're not happy. So because we're not happy right now, we think, well, I would be happy if I could just get through the week, or I would be happy if I could just get this raise, or I would be happy if I could just get this partner, or I would be happy, whatever. So we're chasing things that we feel will make us happy. That desire enables us to get things. We get something, right? And we feel at that time that we've gotten something stable, lasting. Oh, I got the raise, or I got the partner, I got um, uh, you know, I got through the week, whatever. But none of these things are permanent. All of them slip through our fingers, right? One way that they're impermanent is because the minds that appreciate them are impermanent. So as soon as you get something, you begin to take it for granted. Things age in our minds quite quickly. We begin to expect we're on to the next thing, right? So our mind, the specialness, the wonder, the excitement, the opportunity of things decays very quickly. That's the first kind of impermanence. But also the things themselves decay, right? Partner changes. You got a promotion, we got a new job, and then the job changes what it was. And we liked it at one point, we no longer like it. The partner, we liked them at one point, we find them difficult to be with now. Things change continuously because that is their nature. But when things change, that is directly conflicting with our desires. We desire things to be the way we saw them, to be what we wanted them to be. Our desires create a picture of a world the way we want that world to be. And maybe for a moment, it is that way. But it never lasts, right? Everything, the world is like water, just flowing constantly. It's continuous change. Obviously, at an atomic level, things are changing all the time, but you don't have to look to an atomic level to notice change. You look around, you look at the news, social media, of course, that flood of constant flow of information. But even on a normal scale, small scale, dust is settling, things are wearing out, communications changing, relationships are changing, feelings changing, our bodies are changing, more gray hairs every day. Um, so change is the nature of things, but that is not the nature of how we our mind holds on to things. So there's this constant misalignment between our mind, what we want, what we believe, the way we think the world is. And as soon as we have that idea, a mental model of the world doesn't match. Never match. It never matches for more than a moment, more than an instant. Even in that instant, doesn't really match. That is a subtle cause of suffering. That is at the root of all of the sufferings that we experience. Um, our minds operating with a mental model that never matches reality, never keeps up with reality. Maybe we do okay for a little bit, but then the world's changing. That is the nature. That is a world that is the nature of suffering for us, because maybe not right away, just like the sun on your neck, right? Maybe no problem right away, but before long, there will be pain. Maybe like this food that you've eaten that's poisonous. Maybe no problem right away, but before long, there will be pain. If you eat food that causes you to get diabetes, delicious. You may enjoy your way all the way there. When the sickness emerges, you won't be enjoying that, right? The fear, the pain, the failing eyesight or whatever the consequences. So similarly, implicit just in the way our minds normally work are the causes of suffering. And that is the case with everybody. Everyone is struggling to keep up with a world that is in constant change. The analogy that is normally used is the analogy of drowning. So when you're drowning, it takes constant effort to stay afloat. Or if you're in the water trying to avoid drowning, it takes constant effort to stay afloat, right? Because no sooner have you gotten yourself up than things have changed, right? You're falling down again, right? So it's never a stable state. And so our mind puts us in this place where we are always trying to adapt to the world that we're experiencing, and our mind is never there, never hitting it. We're never quite understanding the full world. We're always something left to learn. Anyway, within this is suffering or the seeds of suffering. Every living being is facing this. And therefore, every living being is a worthy object of our compassion. Every living being suffers sooner, later, greater sufferings, lesser sufferings. Seven sufferings that everyone faces, right? The suffering of birth. We're born, as one text says, we're born amidst blood and screams. Our screams are our mother's blood and so forth. The first thing we do when we're born is scream. That is our first opinion. I've registered my opinion on this experience of life is painful. Aging causes suffering, sickness causes suffering, death causes suffering. Having to part with what we like causes suffering. Having to encounter what we do not like causes suffering. And failing to satisfy our desires, these seven sufferings we all experience. So everyone is a worthy object of compassion, whether they are of high status or low status, whether they have a partner, no partner, many friends, no friends, have a job, no job, healthy, not healthy. In a sense, only time separates us from all of these states. Right now, I appear to be healthy. I have no idea, right? Could be cancer growing inside my body right now. I have no idea. Could be any number of conditions, and eventually there will be something, right? Uh, it's only a matter of time that separates us from the experience of pain and pain, loss, fear. Now, that is not to exaggerate our pains. It's not to dismiss the pleasures that we experience, the enjoyment, the peace, the comfort, the relationships, and so forth that we experience, and all the things we enjoy. But it is to explain this expression. I teach only suffering and the alleviation of suffering. So this is suffering. What is the alleviation of suffering? The alleviation of suffering is that we all have the potential to become free from these sufferings. Not in the sense of not dying, not in the sense of not aging, not in the sense of not getting sick, not in the sense of not losing things we like, not in the sense of not encountering things we don't like, and so forth. But we have the potential to become free from the suffering of aging, the suffering of death, the suffering of sickness, and so forth. Because suffering is a state of mind. Suffering exists within our mind. The alleviation of suffering exists within the mind. We need to increase our understanding and our confidence, both of these subtle forms of suffering that afflict us and others all the time, but also of the possibility within our mind for suffering being eliminated. You think about the level of angst that a small child or a teenager experiences, especially teenagers. I feel like being a teenager, they're in the prime of their beauty, their energy, their health, and their anxiety, right? And their pain, right? And the things that teenagers get anxious about and experience suffering due to are things that, people are older, like, don't worry about it, right? That attitude, that mindset where we see someone worrying or experiencing pain or suffering about something that we think, it's fine. You don't need to worry about that. That is the contrast between our wisdom from simple experience and their lack of wisdom through lack of experience. So that's an example of how we no longer suffer. Somebody doesn't like us. Okay, that's fine. There's people we don't like, perhaps, unless you've trained in affectionate love. Um, that doesn't have to cause us suffering. But for a teenager, somebody doesn't like you. Agony, misery, right? So it's just a simple example of how wisdom can enable us to be free from these sufferings, the sufferings of, for example, worrying too much about what other people think of us. So Buddha emphasized the potential within our mind to recognize these subtle forms of suffering, to become determined to overcome these subtle causes of suffering, and the potential, our ability to actually overcome these causes of suffering, and how we do that. So this, interestingly, one of the most powerful ways to become free from suffering ourselves is to train in great compassion, this mind wishing others to be free from suffering. At the root of our own suffering is a profound self-centeredness. Whenever we are training in compassion for others, we are shifting our attention away from ourselves and we're shifting our attention to them. We think about, we spend all this time worrying about ourselves. Stop worrying about yourself. Think about others. What are they experiencing? How do they feel, right? You're overwhelmed with your work. Everybody's overwhelmed with their work, right? You're feeling ignored. Everybody feels ignored, right? You're feeling disrespected. Everybody's feeling disrespected, right? Stop thinking about yourself. Think about others. If you don't worry about yourself, you have no problems, right? Your problems are not a problem, right? If you don't worry about yourself, your problems are not a problem. And if your problems are not a problem, are they really a problem? Like if you don't have a problem with your difficulties and pains and suffering and aging and so forth, Does anybody else? Does anybody else mind that you're aging? No. Nobody cares at all if you're aging, going to get sick, that we're going to die. Everybody expects us to die. We're the only ones who really desperately want to not die. Of course, we may have obligations and responsibilities to care for others, um, but no question, it is the self-centeredness that surrounds our suffering and pain, making them worse, making our sufferings and pains. Meditating on great compassion is a powerful weapon to cut through our own self-centered mind and to turn our attention to others and what we can do to help alleviate their problems. So there's a line from this beautiful text, one of my favorite texts, 8 Steps to Happiness, New 8 Steps to Happiness, as it's called now. It's a translation and a commentary to a brief 8-line or 8-verse prayer. And the verse that pertains to great compassion says, "Whenever I see unfortunate beings oppressed by evil and violent suffering, may I cherish them as if I had found a rare and precious treasure." So whenever I see unfortunate beings oppressed by evil and violent suffering, may I cherish them as if I had found a rare and precious treasure. This mind is these verses are pointing us to the mind of great compassion, and specifically they're saying that when we see others who are suffering, we should feel like we had found rare and precious treasures. An interesting mind, right? Normally, if we see someone who is suffering, we feel uncomfortable, right? We feel maybe a bit uneasy. We see a homeless person on the street, and maybe we feel uncomfortable around them. We think, oh, they want something from me. I have something to give. Maybe I should. We feel a little bit conflicted. Maybe I should. Maybe I shouldn't. Feel a bit conflicted. Feel a bit embarrassed about our own. Maybe we're in a car. We have good conditions, clothing, and so forth. Bit embarrassed about that. So seeing others suffering can sometimes make us feel uncomfortable, right? When we see others suffering, we can feel like we have encountered a rare and precious treasure. It's interesting. Why? Why such a mind? Because it is only through encountering those who are experiencing difficulty that we can develop this mind of great compassion. Now, everyone is suffering on one obvious or more subtle way, but it is when we see that suffering peeking through, like seeing the cracks in the seeming. Everyone, people tend to put up a polish, like everything's fine, right? But you see these little cracks, like a little glimmer of worry. And in that little crack, that little glimmer of worry, you can see in someone how much fear they have, pain they have. Even people who are very, polished outwardly, smooth talking, look healthy, and whatever else. They keep that appearance and they keep it up so that people don't see what's actually going on beneath the surface, which is how much fear and pain and uncertainty. Again, because they live in a world that is constantly changing, while they are expecting and hoping it to remain the same. So when we actually see those experiencing suffering, we should feel like we have encountered a rare and precious treasure, and we should cherish them. Again, back to this mind, seeing this person is important, this person's suffering is important. Cherishing means valuing. Valuing means holding something to be important, to be beneficial. The values of things are created by the mind, right? You go to a yard sale, like what's the difference between a priceless artifact that sells for $1 million and a worthless piece of junk? It's just a concept, right? Maybe the same, rock, fossil, something like that. the value of things is imputed, created by mind. We can see this now with cryptocurrency. People just, some code, literally just some number, some long bit of data, and we assign value tens of thousands of dollars to that because of a convention and how that data is connected to other data. It's just an idea, right? What is most valuable is that which can help us to generate this mind of great compassion. The mind of great compassion is not just um, words. This mind of great compassion is something we have to engage with internally. Whenever we see our own suffering, for example, we can think this is a sign that the suffering of others is far greater. And in that way, our own suffering, even our own pains, difficulties, can teach us about the suffering of others and how great their suffering is, and how um, and help us to develop this mind of great compassion. So this is the way to train in compassion, to take every opportunity encountering others, seeing their difficulty, to remind us this person is important, their freedom is important. May they be free from suffering. May they be free from suffering. Whenever we see our own suffering, feel our own suffering, we think, this is reminding me that other suffering is far worse. May others be free from this suffering. Whatever suffering we feel, we know others experience, countless others experience the same suffering. We think, may they be free. Okay, so based on that preliminary explanation, we can take some time now to actually meditate on this mind of great compassion. So, as usual in our meditation, we sit comfortably, relax. We take a deep breath in and out. We allow, with this next breath, we allow our body to relax. Then we ask ourselves, what is important right now? So we breathe, and with each breath, we use our breath for a while to settle our mind. With each breath, we focus on that sensation of breath, especially as it's entering and leaving the tips of our nostrils, right at the boundary between inside and outside, where when we breathe in, where when we breathe out. And then we can bring to mind our own sufferings, things that disturb our mind, things we're worried about. But instead of just obsessing on them in our normal self-centered way, we think, who else is experiencing these same problems? These sufferings, these problems that I face, they are insignificant compared to the similar sufferings of all living beings. Whatever sufferings we experience are insignificant compared to the infinite sufferings of others experiencing pains just like our own, far worse. We bring to mind our social circle, everyone who influences us throughout our life, friends, family, parents, neighbors, co-workers. We imagine that we're in a peaceful, beautiful, inspiring and uplifting environment, and that these living beings are around us, but that rather than experiencing suffering, they are happy, peaceful, virtuous, and delighted to be engaging in meditation along with us. We are imagining their being free from whatever suffering, including the suffering of just ordinary existence that afflicts them. For the last few minutes, we just hold this mind of great compassion, extending it to all living beings, all sufferings. May they be free. And we can reflect through this time, through listening, contemplating, meditating in this way, we've changed our mind. We've taken our natural pathways of compassion within our mind and we've trodden them down more. We've deepened these pathways, strengthened them so that eventually they become a great highway. So that eventually this compassion pervades everything that we do, think, and say. We make a decision as we leave our meditation and enter daily life. Just like this verse, whenever I see unfortunate beings oppressed by evil or violent suffering, may I cherish them as if I had found a rare and precious treasure. Whenever I see unfortunate beings oppressed by evil or violent suffering, may I cherish them as if I had found a rare and precious treasure. We try to hold that mind in our daily life as we arise from our meditation.